Hi everybody, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the process of how I learned Korean, since it's been 2.5 years now since I officially started learning. I think I did one update at 18 months, which went surprisingly well, got quite a lot of views and stuff. So it's probably a good time now to update everyone on how I'm doing and what's going on. So yeah, 2.5 years of learning Korean. Firstly, go through the pros, the cons, and maybe my current level, plus what I'm going to do in the future, how I feel about everything. For those of you who don't know me, I use the method called immersion learning, which is essentially slightly different to what most language learners use. So traditional learning would be learning a language using what's called a skill building based approach. So this skill building approach would be essentially learning a language like it's a skill, something like you learn in school, like you learn maths by, studying, learning how to use equations, etc., etc. Which sounds well and good, but in the practical world and general efficiency, according to linguistics, they say that doing things in the traditional manner is pretty much not going to get you to the level of fluency that most people would want to get to. So, alternative to this and the most effective way of learning language, which is the way that I sort of subscribe to and I believe is the best for anyone trying to reach a decent level of fluency in their target language, is immersion learning. Now, immersion learning is based off the input hypothesis proposed by Dr. Stephen Krashen. I think it may not have been his idea originally, but Dr. Stephen Krashen is the one that made it famous. So what the input hypothesis says is the more time you spend in the language getting first-hand listening, reading, input would be the most effective because you're learning how to comprehend the language first before you learn to speak. And this is very important because if you ask someone directions on the street and you ask them, you're able to speak and ask them, but if you can't understand the answer, then it's essentially meaningless to you, right? This is also how we learn languages as a kid. You spend about 2 years of the beginning of your life not being able to really speak properly or output correctly, but eventually, through input, getting lots of it, you become able to speak, right? So this way of learning kind of follows nature, and through my experience, it's been the most effective, considering I've done a bit of both. Since I've started this, it's been 2.5 years exactly. I would say I've been pretty hardcore with it mostly. So what immersion learning consists of is watching TV shows in your target language without any English subtitles, reading books, listening to things, generally just getting lots of input without any English crutch to, make things understandable. You have to kind of make it comprehensible by working through it yourself. I use a program called Anki, which is probably something that people are quite familiar with. And the way I use this is I essentially did about an hour a day of Anki study in supplement to what I was doing pretty much full time, which was immersion learning. In the beginning, I think I already covered this in my previous video. I was going at it pretty much all day. Any sort of spare time I had, I would be trying my best to make sure there's some Korean in front of me, whether that be reading, whether that be watching a TV show, video games, anything that I could do to get a little bit more Korean. I even did something which is called passive listening, which is where you have your headphones on, playing some sort of Korean audio, but you're not necessarily listening to it. You're not necessarily listening to it actively. It's just kind of there while you're doing other tasks. So that was something I used for the first year. Now, first year video has already been done and made, so I'm not going to go over that too much. So I'm now going to start at the point of what I did from the sort of 18-month period going forward. At the 18th month mark, I was living in Korea doing a language course here in Seoul. The language course was more sort of a preparation for me to go to uni, not because I necessarily believe in the course. I did that for a few months, but I didn't actually get into the university I wanted at the time. So I ended up going back to the UK for about 6 months or so. In the last 6 months whilst living here, I've managed to get into university, and now I'm currently enrolled at a Korean university with all my lectures in Korean, besides one. And I've also made another video on that if you guys are interested. Definitely didn't study as much as I did in the first 18 months because I just wasn't as motivated. So one thing I didn't do passive listening. I kind of stopped with the passive listening and only did active immersion, which is actually probably, not the worst thing I could do. But if I wanted to make, super gains, then I could be passive listening all the time. But I have some friends who have carried on the passive listening, and I feel like my level isn't really too much different from them. So yeah, perhaps maybe it's not like a be-all and end-all, but I suppose I did have the advantage of living in Korea. So living in Korea, clearly you're getting passive listening without even trying, right? So yeah, for 6 months while I was in Korea, I was trying to just use my Korean as much as possible, but I didn't actually have that many conversation partners. I had a few friends here and there, but I didn't go completely crazy with it as opposed to where I'm at now. But yeah, for the 6 months, I was just going quite, I would say, kind of hardcore for the average person, but quite light for me. I would say maybe 4 hours a day of watching stuff in Korean and immersion, and then maybe do my sort of Anki reps on top of that. So that was kind of how I spent my 6 months, and there's not really much else I could add. My level was still the same as I kind of said in the 18th month video. Then coming across the 2 year mark, at the 2 year mark, I went back to the UK, obviously, and that was kind of a shock because I kind of failed at something that I wanted to achieve. And I was like, oh, well, I'm kind of at a setback here. So my motivation kind of, I wouldn't say completely plummeted, but it kind of got a little bit less. But, I was still doing pretty much the usual 3-4 hours a day of just, solid immersion, and just kept at it for a while. Yeah, I didn't go outside an awful lot during that time. And yeah, the number of my Korean sort of conversation partners lessened a lot because I wasn't actually in Korea as well. So that was a kind of hit to the old sort of learning efficiency, I guess you could say. So yeah, moving on, the last 6 months up until now, I'd come back to Korea, and I'm trying to use Korean as much as I possibly can. Like, I'm trying to output as much as I can, trying to meet as many new friends as I can. And on top of this, I've also been trying to do stuff that kind of test me socially. One of my objectives outside of learning Korean is trying to like level up socially and be a bit more of an outgoing person. Yeah, for the final sort of 6 months, I remember that I would really not spend much time in English at all during the first like couple months while I was here, because I was really, stoked on trying to get into university again, because university was the reason that I came back here, and I hadn't actually gotten in at that point. So I was trying to level up my Korean the best I could before going in, to make sure like I had a solid base, because at that time I could still understand quite a lot, but I felt like I wasn't quite ready for reading university texts, which I'm still not perfect at now, but I've definitely come a long way in terms of finding obscure words and upping my vocabulary. So yeah, for about 3 months, I was still going really, really hard, but still not doing passive listening because I was getting that in my actual natural environment in my life. During this time, I actually got back on Anki because there was a point where I'd stopped for a while because I kind of found it overwhelming and I wasn't really having that much fun sentence mining and making new cards. So I decided to kind of let that loose a bit, and I've recently got back on the sort of habit of doing it sort of every day, every other day. But I haven't actually been adding many cards. I've always done about 10 cards. I haven't really put in the extra effort to add more cards every day. I just kind of add some when there's stuff there, but I'm not forcing myself to reach that 10 card limit every day. I think in my deck there's probably 7,000-ish, maybe 8,000-ish sentence cards which I've made over the years. But I deleted some because they were like had English translations or whatever, so it's probably, I guess the amount of cards I've repped is probably somewhere around the 10,000 mark, to give you guys the specs, for those of you who care about that. Now I just want to do a little like overview and talk about pros and cons of my journey so far, and what perhaps I would do differently, or perhaps get into some sort of philosophical conversation about what is the right thing to do once you're at my stage. So I'm going to start with the pros and the good things. So although I'm not as accurate as I am in English, I can really quite manage surface level conversations quite well, and it's to a point now where I don't actually really think too much about speaking in Korean. It kind of just comes out naturally, and then there's the occasional sort of like stumble on a word here and there, but it's not super conscious, it's kind of, oh, I'm just speaking, it comes to me quite quickly and naturally. But I'm not super accurate at describing things. So if someone would tell me, what are your thoughts about, I don't know, the upcoming elections, or an area that I'm quite not interested in or haven't read up much on, then I could probably, make my opinion, but it wouldn't be as very academic sounding, nor educated sounding at all, really. So that is a slight disadvantage, I guess you could say. But in terms of like day-to-day conversation, any kind of interaction I have with people is not really going to be a huge issue, unless they want some sort of academic kind of high level answer. Also kind of a weird one, I joined a hip hop club at my school. This was actually first to improve my social skills, but I realized that through doing this, I can actually sort of somewhat freestyle rap in Korean. To some level, not as, again, not as eloquently as I can in English, but that was something that I found quite weird. I didn't think that I would be able to, rhyme at all, but, I'm actually somewhat capable of putting rhymes together, which is really kind of a unique experience. I'm not sure if anyone else is interested in music or anything like that, but for people in the community who like such a thing, is this the normal? I don't really know. Another thing I'd like to highlight is that interactions with people are just really, really precious. I think the best thing about learning Korean, or any other language for that matter, is meeting new people. Being able to talk to people that you just wouldn't have been able to before, or barely been able to communicate with your, their rusty English and stuff. It just wouldn't have been a nice conversation. Actually meeting new partners to speak with, making new friendships, romantic partners, and everything else in between. Just the whole human interaction is really mind-blowing, how just my sort of small few years of effort has been able to let me open up to a wide network of friends and community, whatever. That doesn't mean I'm super in touch with all the Korean community, but I've had a few wild things happen to me. Because of my hard work, I've been able to, meet celebrities, just have crazy experiences just out of me knowing Korean, that things just wouldn't have happened in my home country. if I was just speaking my native language. So yeah, I can really say that is probably the best part about learning Korean, or any language for that matter. And obviously, career-wise, I've been able to get into a university which I perhaps wouldn't have been able to get into that same level of university in my home country. Career-wise, it's really up my odds of success massively. So that's been great. Obviously, other pluses, there are shows nowadays that are getting quite popular, like for example Squid Game or whatever, and other YouTubers and things that I like that I can consume in the native language. Although to be fair, a lot of the content that I do like in Korean does have a translation. There are some things that don't, but a lot of stuff does have an English translation. So I suppose there's a kind of balancing out effect there, but overall, because of the other benefits, I'm still really satisfied that I've gotten to as far as I have. So now for the cons and the not so goods. Where I'm at now, Korean has become a little bit less fun to engage in all the time and go as hardcore as it used to be. So I'm not really finding my daily language learning routine as challenging. I'm only really learning obscure words now, and it doesn't feel like such a challenge to read through stuff. It's similar to gaining vocab in English. I can get this new word. It might be satisfying. It might be okay to have it in my vocabulary, but is it really that useful? Perhaps not. It doesn't really make me feel that excitement I used to get of learning words that were like really essential, and it would come up a lot, and not like it would come up over and over again, which was the sort of key process of enjoying my time in the language, because it was that kind of thirst for knowledge that I had, which I feel like I'm still getting, but it's just not on the same level that it used to be when I was kind of a beginner and not really that good. So I suppose there's kind of a downside to getting somewhat semi-good at a language. You feel like you're only learning obscure words, which is kind of how I feel when I learn a new word in English. In my university lectures, there are some words that are obscure that I do need to know for that class. So it's okay, but it's just not as stimulating as it used to be. And on top of this, Korean isn't actually like the most spoken language in the world. It's still fairly big, and it's got like a fair amount of media to get you covered to at least where I am now. I do kind of miss a lot of like English websites, because if you guys have ever been on a Korean website, you'll know that there's not really great explanations of things. Someone asks a question, saying, why do your eyes get red, for example? A Korean website would say, oh, because you're tired and you need to, diet more, or it will give you like the surface level information of how to kind of fix that problem, but it wouldn't really go into in-depth detail of explaining why that issue occurs. Whereas on an English website, for this example here, it might say, oh, eyes become red. Your eyes become red because of a lack of this, hormone or whatever, give some sort of medical explanation, right? And that stuff, sort of high level stuff, is only really found in books in Korean. And the websites that have information on things are usually blogs written by other people, which aren't necessarily credible nor that deep in terms of what they have. Because of the company Naver, which is basically the Korean Google, a lot of websites are just made by individual people that are just blogs. And blogs are cool, but most of the Korean internet is just straight up blogs and writing that isn't actually in a proper website format. It's all under Naver. So there is that kind of lack of variety in the media that I'm finding nowadays, which is a slight shame. I feel like I've kind of almost dried out of media that is really enjoyable. That's not to say, there aren't things that I still enjoy and there aren't things that are coming out which are good. I just find that every time I go back to English, there's always something like very specific I can narrow stuff down to. Whereas with the sort of limits of the Korean speaking media that is available to me, I can't always get as specific as I'd like to. And now that I'm at a higher level, I'm wanting to find these more specific things. So the only way that I could do that right now is through books, which most of them have been translated, the ones that I'm reading. So there's a slight issue in terms of, well, is this language really practical for me acquiring knowledge going forward? Obviously, I could still read anything up in English that I wanted to, but since my personality is the way it is, I would love to do that in a foreign language, because then I know I'm sort of improving at the language at the same time. Lastly, another sort of con or downside that I've been facing is that when I write things, I definitely don't sound as educated as I like to be. I mentioned earlier with freestyle rap and stuff. That's like a hobby of mine, but in order to get to that level where I'm, really using the vocab where I sound educated, it's going to take me a few more years of actually devote my time to this full time. At university, when I do writings for homework, papers and whatnot, I can feel that I definitely don't sound as educated as I like to be. Like the people in the class next to me will probably give an answer, and although I'm capable of giving an answer myself, the person next to me will always give that kind of deliver the answer in a way that's just a little bit more academic and a little bit more just perfectly well worded and stuff like that, which is something I can recognize my inferiority. It's just, I don't feel like a super massive urge to go out and like change. Like I'm kind of just chilling where I am right now. I'm kind of just okay, chilling, not so bad. To give a better explanation of what my current level actually is, when I'm watching things, there's almost never a word that I don't understand. But sometimes the nuances just don't really hit like they do in English. Perhaps this is due to like a lack of listening or generally a lack of like cultural understanding. I'm probably betting that it's more to do with cultural stuff because as I've lived here and as I've learned the culture, the language has made a little bit more sense to me as well. It's kind of, it goes hand in hand as most language learners would agree. As for like my daily conversations, I can't get to the point where I'm super articulate yet. Like in English, I would have a much easier time describing anything, whereas Korean, I can do it, it's okay, it works, it's just like a little rough around the edges. It's not quite as academic sounding, it's not quite as educated sounding. I think that's the key sort of difference where I'm at now, because there's not really an awful lot that I don't understand. It's more about making what I can use and sort of do understand that little bit better, that little bit refined. And this is the part of the process that I think is probably the least interesting. So what am I doing with my life and Korean in general, and what my goals going forward? Do I have any? So right now, I'll say that doing Korean university is kind of hard, but it's given me a massive opportunity, and doing university here as opposed to in my home country is going to give me definitely that level up in terms of finding a job, because, well, the ranking of the university that I'm at here is like 5th best in the country. Whereas if I went to the UK, I'll probably be at like, 500 best in the country, which is definitely, something I don't take for granted, and I'm really thankful that I've been able to come here. But yeah, in terms of my future career and just generally economically speaking as well, being here is pretty good in terms of quality of life that I'm able to get. So my plan is to continue that and at least finish my undergraduate course at the university that I'm at now, and then I'll make a decision on whether I go back to the UK or go on somewhere else perhaps. And now how Korean fits into all of that, well, of course, Korean, where it is now, is pretty comfortable for me. Like I don't really, like I could straight up stop now and probably be all right for like a year without really touching it that much. But it's just at that comfortable level. It's not at the really nice, oh, this guy's articulate, this guy's quite well educated, oh, he's like native kind of level. I'm not at that native level, I'll tell you that for sure. I don't really use like idioms and stuff like this. Like being at that crisp sounding level will probably take a few more years of work. So the big question is, am I really willing to put in that work? Am I going to put in that work? Honestly, right now, I don't really know if it's going to be worth the cost of doing it. But since I don't really have anything else, like any better options I'd like to do, like for example, I could start an L3. And if I were to start an L3, that would probably be Japanese. I'm doing that at school as one of my elective classes. As it stands now, I still just can't give up on Korean. Like for some reason, like I just can't let it go. It's just been a part of my life for too long. And however much I, sometimes hate it, sometimes love it, it's just not really something that I want to let go yet. So because of that kind of reason, and the fact that I'm living here, of course, you should really be using the language place you're living in. Because of those reasons, I am deciding to at least give it 6 more months before I try and do like any L3 crazy business or, lay off Korean. I don't know. I'm not really sure if anyone else feels the same as me. Like, I don't actually know anyone who's gotten to a similar level than me in Korean, apart from a few other people. But I feel like there's a lot for me to improve, but there's also a lot of time for me just kind of relax and not take things too extreme if that's if I don't really want to, because I've achieved a level that most foreigners don't even achieve. There's still a big part of me that doesn't like being inferior to a native speaker. Doesn't like being that guy who's slightly uneducated, who slightly doesn't know that little bit of culture. Like, it's kind of, I'm part of the group, but I'm not really treated the same because I'm just not at that same level of competence that, I should be at if I was a native to the culture and language or whatever. So I'm not really sure how I'm going to decide. I'm just going to keep at it for 6 months and then maybe make a 3-year video where I decide like, oh, I actually want to do this instead. Oh, I'm going to carry on more. But as it is for now, yeah, I'm just kind of chilling where I'm at. I'm just kind of all right. I'm doing good. I'm just going to keep going. That's the best possible option for me. Perhaps I didn't cover stuff well in this video, then, do leave me a question in the comments. I'll be more than happy to respond to you guys and let you guys know. Perhaps you see me here now at 2.5 years and think, okay, this is probably how I can expect to feel if I do 2.5 years of immersion. Do I think this is worth it for me? My answer would be yes, definitely do it. I don't have any regrets about it. But now is kind of the key point. Now, the 2.5 year mark is the key turning point in someone's language learning career. So for me, I'm going to carry on for at least 6 months and see how I go. And to clarify, my goal has always been to be at that level of a native speaker. Whether that's possible or not, I mean, it's probably possible. It's just the time frames that I'm working on, whether that is right for me, who knows? But yeah, thank you very much, guys, for listening to me talk and hearing my Korean learning experience. If you guys would like to see more stuff like this, let me know. And I wish every single one of you who's watched this so far a good day. Otherwise, that's all I have for you. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.